I think it's such a nice topic this Monday morning with our dear friend Mitali Paul. We're going to talk about the science of empathy and gratitude, right?
Yep.
So what is empathy, Mitali?
So, empathy is the ability to put yourself in somebody else's shoes and the ability to kind of feel and, look at things from another person's perspective. A lot of times, empathy and sympathy get,
Yes.
interchangeably used,
Right.
but they're very different.
Okay.
And sympathy is when you feel sorry for someone, when you feel you're feeling bad about someone or something, and it involves more of pity. But empathy is not only are you when you feel sympathetic, you're feeling bad for them, but you're not really mirroring those feelings. You're not feeling those yourself.
Yes.
Right. But in empathy, you're actually walking in the other person's shoes and feeling for them. So say you have a friend that, a very close friend that loses a family member, you're not going to feel sympathy towards them. You're going to feel empathy towards them because this is a loved one that is hurting. And so you're actually going to feel that pain or you're going to feel for them and for their loss. So there's a slight distinction, but, it's about, similar processes going on in your brain, and we'll get into the neurological piece of it, which is very fascinating. But that's kind of the difference between empathy and sympathy.
Yes. And I think I get it because recently in our community was a big thing. This family lost both their kids at the same time in an accident. So the whole community came together, but these thoughts were running in my mind as a mom, right? And I would just start crying because you're like, everything for me right now runs around my kids, right?
Absolutely.
Like you're like, oh my God, how would that mom be feeling? Like it's time for kids to come home, like, waking up and so like you get it, but I don't know if you feel too much of it, right? So, but I guess as mothers, we are more sensitive to it,
And there's actually a gender difference too. So when you do research and you look at functional MRIs, so you can actually tell the different parts of the brain that get activated when you're feeling feelings of empathy or feelings of gratitude. And again, we'll delve a little bit into it. But again, it's very fascinating to see there's actually a difference between genders. Now, overall, women tend to feel the pain more than men, but overall in how we react or do something about it may not be a significant difference between men or women.
Right.
But women are in general more in tune with other people's feelings, and so they tend to be a little bit more emotional, empathetic. And we'll delve into that. So you have actually 3 types of empathy. You have the emotional empathy, or it's also called the affective empathy. And this is where whatever feelings that somebody else is feeling or going through, you have a reaction or a response to the other person's feelings. It's almost like it's a mirror effect. And there's actually neurons in your brain that are called the mirror neurons.
Right.
And so they actually mirror somebody else's feelings or experience or emotions that they're going through.
That's interesting.
Right? And so that's the effective of emotional empathy piece. And that's where you see the gender difference between men and women, where men, women tend to feel that emotional empathy more strongly than men do. Then you have 2 other types. You have the cognitive empathy, and then you have compassionate empathy. So cognitive empathy, sometimes it's referred to, or in layman's terms, is perspective taking, right? You're able to identify, not only are you feeling the feelings of the other person, but you're able to identify and understand their emotions. Where are they coming from, right? And this is very important when you're doing negotiations or you're trying to motivate other people or you're trying to resolve a conflict. Because not only do you understand their emotions, you're understanding that perspective, where they're coming from, right? And so again, when you're trying to connect with somebody else at work, at home, it's important not just to understand their emotions, but also understand the perspective that they're coming from.
Right.
And then the third one is called compassionate empathy.
Okay.
So that happens when we not only understand the person's predicament, we're feeling their feelings, but we're then driven to action.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So the example that you gave me,
Yeah.
where, you know, you're feeling these parents lost their children, right? You're feeling deeply for them.
Yes.
But then the community comes together and they're driven to action.
Yes.
So maybe they're helping with meal trains. Maybe they're helping with funeral arrangements.
Right.
Maybe they're helping with just being there for the family and running errands and doing things to support them through this crisis and, you know, helping them long term or what have you. And that's where you see compassionate empathy, where you're feeling, you understand where they're coming from. As a parent, you put yourself in their shoes and then you're driven to action. And that's the compassionate empathy piece that drives us to do, you know, philanthropic work, to volunteer, to even do things, you know, not just in people that you know, could be a complete stranger, you know? I was talking to someone yesterday and she lost her mom and we were talking about homelessness and we were just driving and we saw this homeless person on the side of the street and she just shared with me that, you know, I usually have water or cereal bars or something that I'll give to homeless people, like at the street.
So
like
sweet.
when you're driving to work and you see someone, I don't like to give money because again, I don't know what, you know, if they're really going to use the money for the right reasons, right? And she shared with me that when her mom passed away, she had all these jackets and warm clothes and sweaters of her mom, and she just put them in the back of her car. And anytime she's driving, if she sees someone, you know, she gives them a jacket. And to me, again, it's like a great example of how you're passing on your mother's legacy, right? And doing something for someone. And that's where you have that compassionate empathy. You understand that the person doesn't have the needs and you're, you know, trying to help them out. So
I have this neighbor, and this was like, I'm like, oh wow, I didn't think about it. Like she'll see construction workers working in the cold weather and she'll just go buy them like coffee and donuts and things like that. I'm like, wow, that's like so, like, cause you see them all the time, but it doesn't cross your mind that they're feeling cold too, right? To take care of them. So yeah.
You know? I know. And Houston's probably, you know, summers when you think about it, you know, I feel so bad for all the construction workers or people that, you know, even people that are keeping our, you know, our landscaping intact and things like that. It's not a place you want to be working outdoors when it's, you know, 100 degrees. And how often we drive by and not even think about, you know, someone or something else. And so that's kind of empathy. But, you know, the interesting thing about what's happening in your brain when you feel empathy is the fascinating part that I wanted to focus on. Because, you know, yes, there's karma and, you know, your parents always raise you saying, do good and good will come back to you and all of that. I mean, there's all of those reasons, right? But even if you are the most selfish person and only want to think about yourself, like empathy actually helps you, right? Because the way it actually activates and there's a lot of research and it's fascinating when you read about, you know, the neuroscience behind it. There's functional MRIs that can be done in people's brains where you can actually see how your brain gets activated when you practice empathy and when you have empathy. And so there's like 10 different areas in the brain that actually get activated in the process of empathy. So you have like the temporal or the frontal lobe, and that's where all, you know, you have a lot of the thinking and the reasoning and things like that. And then you have the amygdala, which is at the brainstem, right? And that's where you have the fight and flight response, right? So a lot of times, you know, when you get anxious or what have you, it's the negative responses and the fight or flight and the adrenaline that gets and we know that, right? But on the positive side, you have the happy hormones, the feel good hormones, right? You know, when you work out, you have release of serotonin and that's why you feel better. You know, empathy has, and we'll talk about gratitude. Empathy and gratitude are two traits that, you know, Earlier, it was believed it was intrinsic. You either have it or you don't. But these are things that you can actually make an effort to develop and cultivate in yourself.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
And why would I want to be interested? Well, it's actually good for your health.
Okay.
It helps you sleep better. It actually improves your immune system.
Right.
It actually, helps in so many different ways.
Right.
In creating that positive thinking, helps in fighting anxiety. So it's actually an antidote to anxiety
Yes.
and stress.
Right.
And that's why, it's important. So it's important to understand. So an interesting study where you actually see in a functional MRI how empathy reacts. So they took a group of 16 women, okay, and they put them, in an MRI machine, and then they pricked them with a pin on their hands, right?
Yeah.
And so you could see the brain light up, the pain matrix, right?
Yeah.
Then what they do is they take these women away, and then they tell them that they're doing the exact same thing, and they do that to their spouses or their partners.
Yes.
And they're still under the MRI.
Yeah.
So you can see that the same parts of the brain light up in the MRI. So even though the pain is not being felt by you, it's your partner or your spouse, you actually have the same reaction in your brain.
Oh, wow.
So that's really, really fascinating, right? And that's why when you think like mothers know their children or what have you, you have that deep connection. And there's actually science to show that you can feel other people's pain. Now, the flip side of it is if you're too empathetic, like you said, right? Say I'm a frontline healthcare EMS worker. And if I'm constantly feeling the pain of every patient that I'm dealing with, then that's going to lead to burnout, right? So there's that fine balance where you've got to be just enough empathetic, especially if you're in a profession that is very demanding and with, where people are depending upon you. So it gets a little, tricky there where you have to find that balance.
Right.
But otherwise, again, it's fascinating to see that your brain and your neurons and, the whole biochemistry of your mind and your body changes when you have empathy, when you have gratitude, and there's research to support it.
Yeah, so I'm glad you said that, because you're like, all the dads out there who say, moms can feel it. There is science to prove it, right? Not just for the kids, but for the spouses too.
Exactly. Maybe not to the same degree. I didn't say that. So obviously when we talk about the benefits of empathy, right? There's, and we talked about mirror neurons. So, even in our minds, our neurons are kind of constantly getting motor, they're basically looking at people and how you're moving, how your body language, your tone of voice, how you are interacting with me. Subconsciously, my neurons are mirroring that. So if you come across as, kind of cold and very reserved, then I may not realize that, but I'm going to kind of mirror that. Okay. And that's where, again, when you think about all the strife we have going around across the world, and, it's, you talk about when you see other kids suffering, I mean, it breaks my heart every time I read the news and I hear about the women and children that, everything that's happening in Russia, in Ukraine, and, Israel with the Hamas attacks. I mean, at some point we tend to get desensitized, right? Because that's the only way to survive, because sometimes I just don't read the news because it hurts me, it disturbs me so deeply. To read some of the things, and I mean the atrocities of war and all of that. And then we get so desensitized that we're not thinking or we're not talking about it. And that's our survival mechanism, right? That's
I'm so glad
as humans, that's our way to insulate ourselves from other people's pain. To a certain extent, it's needed. So again, you don't feel completely emotionally drained all the time because you're constantly feeling for other people.
Right.
But when you take it to the other extreme, right? Then there's lack of compassion. There's lack of empathy. You're not grateful for what's happening. And when we know that how you are with others the other person's brain and the chemistry and the neurons are able to mirror that.
Yeah.
When you think of it, the solution of spreading good in the world is kind of simple.
Yes.
Because you do good and other people will mirror it.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
But are we actually doing that? I mean, and that's where, again, it's important. Yes, during the holidays, we think about charity and we think about being good and all of that. But again, it's something that you can practice in your life every day,
every single day,
and it not only helps our community, not just helps other people, it's actually beneficial for us. There are health benefits to it,
right?
For being kind and nice and empathetic and grateful for what you have. There's actually health benefits
and there's science to prove.
Exactly.
And I'm so glad you said the desens because when the Uvalde thing happened, after that, I just could not, I had to on my phone, just take off everything. Even Facebook I stopped because
the triggers.
It was just, I think it was just too much. And then you feel so sad for those parents and for that community that you just desensitize. So now I can watch the news. I mean, the whole war thing, seeing the little kids, I see that sometimes on my husband's phone and it still triggers,
Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. And especially now with social media, right? So again, I mean, we can use social media to also spread empathy and spread gratitude, right? And, how do you counter all the negative or negativity with positivity, right? And it's not, you're we all have our ups and downs, and we all have, positives and negatives, but, with empathy, it actually helps you kind of be so much more tolerant, right? Because you're constantly thinking about the other person's perspective. And I had this very interesting discussion with, kind of a coach, and she was talking about how the biggest challenge for her is to empathize with Hitler. And for me, I was like, wow, that's really
that is taking.
But I mean, when you start thinking about, some of the things now, there's some things that are, generically from all moral compasses are going to be pure evil, period. And you're not going to disagree with that. But, you don't have to really empathize with Hitler. It could be someone that you don't see eye to eye at work. Or a family member that maybe you have a difference of opinion. I mean, we are so politically polarized right now. Sometimes it's hard for us to even discuss politics with our friends. Because there's so much of polarity, right?
Exactly.
But then that's where empathy comes into place, because you're trying to understand the other person's perspective. You're trying to understand their emotions. You're trying to be respectful of the differences without getting carried away with your own emotions, right? And so even in just connecting with people and our day-to-day interactions with people, when you practice that empathy, it helps you, cherish those relationships without
and
getting
keep
to
your
the point,
sanity.
and without getting to the point to say, Lila is, supporting such and such person, and now I totally am questioning my friendship with her because, how can she even support that person, right? I mean, we're so caught up in our own perspectives. And so, how do we develop empathy? What are some things that we can do?
We're going to take a quick break before we get to that, and we'll be back right after the break.
Okay.
Welcome, Houston, to Chai Time on 103.5 FM. We're having this great conversation with Mitali about science of empathy and gratitude, and she's going to help us learn how we develop empathy, right?
Sure. So a couple of really simple or easy things is, active listening. When we practice active listening, we're actually observing the person's body language. We're trying to understand where they're coming from. You ask sensitive questions. You kind of understand what the person's going through and where they're coming from. And that gives us that additional perspective. A lot of times when you're listening, right, we're listening to respond not listening to understand. And this I learned from one of my coaches, or, one of my mentors. He always said that it's important. Active listening is, most of the times we're listening to respond. You're talking and I'm already thinking about what you're saying and how I'm going to respond to it, rather than actually paying attention and listening to you. Or we're on our phones, we're doing so many things, we're multitasking. And again, when in our busy lives, it's hard to cultivate that active listening. But once you do that, then you can be a lot more empathetic, because you're actually taking in all the verbal and the nonverbal cues. And then, try to expand your friend circle and people that you know, to include more people with diverse perspectives, right? And that's the other challenge, is like we tend to congregate with people that are more like us, that we have more things in common.
Absolutely.
And then we were just talking, during the break, how it's difficult to kind of, empathize with people that may be different from you, may have different opinions or different loyalties. And how do you then be empathetic towards them, is trying to understand where they come from and have those diverse perspectives and diverse opinions that surround you, so that you're constantly challenged to think differently and be more understanding, right? And then understand your own triggers, your own biases. Embrace your own vulnerability. If you know that there are certain things that are triggers for you, be conscious about them, but then also understand how that's impacting your decision making, right? Like, especially, it could be at work. If you're a manager or a leader, you have to be fair, you have to be empathetic, you have to be consistent across the board and not let your personal biases come in. And how are you going to be empathetic with someone who may be very different from you, and that you may not see eye to eye, but it's still your responsibility to, be empathetic with them, just like you are with other people. Same thing at home. Like, how do you teach that to your kids? Right? You have to model those behaviors yourself. Are you listening to them? Are you helping them see diverse perspectives? If they come to you and talk about maybe some differences that they had with other kids, or a different perspective, do you take the time to sit down and talk to them about it and say, you know what? Yes. I mean, they may say this or that, but, there's always two sides to the coin, or what have you. Like, exploring those conversations, right? And then, anticipating other people's needs. That's another way of being empathetic, right? So you're not just focused on what needs to get done and what you have to do and what your contribution is to that particular situation or conversation, but you're trying to understand, what would Lela need, and then you're trying to be proactive in that situation. And that also helps with practicing empathy. And then we said, recognize your biases. And those are really the key things. So really, really active listening, asking a lot of questions, be curious. Even if you're, in the elevator and you see someone and you're having a conversation, ask more meaningful conversations. Get to know your coworkers or get to know your friends and have deeper conversations, not just about, I don't know, the weather, the politics or kids, but truly connecting at that level where you understand where the other person's coming from, what life experiences they've felt, what are they going through, what are their challenges now, and and that's where you have that deeper connection to feel empathetic with them, and then you get more forgiving too, right? Because you brush off things, you brush off conflicts, because you understand, no, that person's going through a lot right now, so I want to give them grace, right? It's a lot easier to do that when you understand what they're going through, right? So those are some things, but we should switch gears and talk about gratitude.
Yes.
Right?
And before we start, I had a quote actually from Eckhart Tolle. If the only prayer you say in your entire life is thank you, that'll be enough.
That is beautiful.
Yeah.
That is beautiful. And Eckhart Tolle is one of the gurus, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Of gratitude, of mindfulness. And, when his concepts and his, thoughts started getting discussed, there was a lot of, people would scoff at it and they're like, oh, all this, mindfulness stuff and this and that, right? It's like, oh, we don't need this stuff. It's all the fluff. But again, there is so much of research and science, and gratitude is even more stronger and powerful. And gratitude is actually being used to treat mental health. Right? Practicing gratitude is actually one of the interventions of helping people with mental health issues. So,
amazing.
you know, empathy does play a role, but gratitude actually plays a very important role, and it gets prescribed. I mean, if you're seeing a therapist or a counselor, they're going to ask you to do certain things that are going to be involving developing that gratitude. So gratitude, basically, we all know the word gratitude. It's you know, empathy may be like you have to understand what empathy is, but gratitude is just feeling thankful, feeling grateful for something or someone. As simple as the term it is, again, what it does to your brain, your mind, and your body is amazing. You know, so at a neurological level, gratitude actually regulates your sympathetic nervous system. So you have the sympathetic nervous system that makes you sweat, that makes you, you know, your heart pump or what have you. There's, you know, all these anxiety responses, right, that your sympathetic nervous system that actually creates. At the psychological level, it conditions the brain to filter out negative thoughts. So again, it's, you know, when people said, you know, you think positive thoughts and good things will happen, there's actually some meaning to it. It's not that you're projecting something out into the universe and it's coming back. For skeptics out there, it may not be that, but it's actually where you're wiring your brain to think more positively, so that when you are in a stressful situation, when you're going through a crisis in your life, or you're trying to help somebody else in crisis, you have the resilience, the emotional resilience to handle it better, because you have trained your brain. Right?
That's beautiful.
So again, it doesn't have to be like, you know, you don't have to do this out of the altruism of your heart, right? You don't want to be, you know, you don't want to be Mother Teresa. You don't want to win an award for, you know, being grateful or empathetic. Do it for yourself, right? Because anxiety is, as we talked about, like the amygdala, right? You have that fight, flight, or freeze response. There's 3 responses that it just circulates. When you're afraid of something, say you get into a car wreck, or you get really, really angry with someone, or, you know, you're getting mugged at gunpoint, there's only 3 reactions that's going to come. It's going to be fight, flight, or you freeze. Right? But when you start practicing gratitude and have these positive training in the brain, then it helps you deal with crisis in a much calmer way. Your anxiety is going to be lower. So if normally your anxiety is here, right? And then you have a stressful situation, it's going to be here. But if you're constantly practicing gratitude, your anxiety level is going to be lower than what your normal was. So when you are dealing with a crisis, then you are much better equipped to actually. So it helps in reducing anxiety, helps with stress, you know, and like I said, it is a very powerful way of dealing with mental health and issues in different people. So they actually use empathy in treating people that are, you know, sociopaths or narcissists that only think about themselves, right? But if you start practicing empathy and forcing them to do exercises that help with empathy and gratitude, then you see that now you're not going to completely cure someone if that's their personality type or that personality disorder, but it equips them to interact and deal with other people in a much better way. And you can't do this with meds. There's no medicine. You can't take a pill that will have the same reaction to activating the brain cells and the mirror neurons. So the only way to do it is by practicing it and actually doing it, right?
That is very fascinating.
Isn't it? So just a simple thank you, right? Where it's coming from
the heart.
Is actually good for your heart. It's actually good for your heart because it helps in reducing cardiac illnesses. Like, you know, there's like tons and tons of research again. So again, if you don't want to do it for anybody else, do it for yourself.
Yes.
That's my take home today. Like, you know, just do it for yourself, if not for anyone else.
Right.
And the world's going to be a better place.
And
you're going to be healthier.
Yes, and the side effect is going to be the world's a better place and for you, right? So yeah, it has positive side effects.
Yeah. So I want to delve a little bit about why I chose, you know, gratitude and empathy, and why these are important things to think about. There's, you know, there's research. So psychologists believe that emotional resilience, right? How strong we are in being able to deal with things, whether it's crises or whatever it is, just being able to be emotionally resilient.
Right.
There are 6 components to it. First is the social competence.
Okay.
Your ability to stand out among others and to be able to win a situation. So you're competent in social situations. That's one aspect of it. Then problem solving. Just when you're thrown with a situation, how quickly you're able to focus on the solutions and sometimes proactively, you know, solve things so you can be a better problem solver. Then there's autonomy. The motivation to exercise freedom. You want to be able to make your own decisions. Then you have forgiveness, and that's your inner power to let go of something, right? That has hurt you or upset you or what have you, and you forgive someone. And then the 2 other things are empathy and gratitude, right? So, you know, problem solving, social competence, autonomy, forgiveness, those are again things that you can continue to develop and work on. But these 2, empathy and gratitude, are in some ways the easiest, you know, things that you can work on to help with your overall emotional resilience. And there's enough research to say that it actually has physical benefits. Like problem solving may not have health benefits. Social competence may not have health benefits for you. But these are 2 things that actually have research supported, you know, health benefits for you, and are being used in dealing with mental health, you know, issues. So empathy is again the strength to feel others and look, you know, and understand where they're coming from. And then gratitude. So when you're managing these positive emotions like satisfaction, happiness, pleasure, gratitude enhances our emotional resilience and builds our inner strength to combat stress. And that's why they say, you know, and there are different things that you can do. You can have a gratitude journal. You can write letters, you know, gratitude letters. Like a lot of times, you know, like
who are you writing these letters to?
Anyone that made a difference. You know, anyone that you're thankful for.
Really?
That either directly impacted you or someone else. You know,
I don't
it could be your teacher from middle school that maybe had a lasting impact, and you never got to say thank you to her. Or him. And you write a letter to them why it's important, and imagine the joy that they would experience in getting something. Maybe they haven't heard from you in like 20 years, right? And they suddenly get a letter in the mail or an email or whatever it is, right? Or you're acknowledging someone on social media. But you know, the joy that it gives you in showing their gratitude towards the other person, and the joy that the recipient feels on being acknowledged for something that they may not have even known made an impact on you. Right? And that's again a way, very easy way of practicing gratitude. You know, during the break we were talking about this gratitude circle that we did. You know, you get together with friends and you sit down and you just share or express one thing that you're grateful for about the other person, that you appreciate.
Or you respect, you know.
Or you respect about the other person, that you appreciate about the other person. And not only it gives you joy in sharing that, but the person that receives it also feels grateful and thankful about receiving that compliment. So there you're activating 2 people and in that feel good, right? And there's actually, you know, these hormones and the science behind, again, how does gratitude actually help improve health? Right? You have several different hormones that get released. Okay, from your body, from your brain, when you feel that gratitude feeling, or that positive feeling of gratefulness, you have oxytocin, you have dopamine, you have serotonin. These are all those hormones that are the feel-good hormones, right?
Right.
So when you, again, if you do a functional MRI on someone, and the fascinating part of the gratitude is that it has long-term effects.
Yeah.
So there hasn't been like enough research on empathy to say that there's long-term effects, but with gratitude, they did study on a group, right? And they got them together. It was a pilot, and they said, sit down and write a letter to someone that you never got to say thank you for something, right?
Okay.
And they did that exercise. And then they kept, monitoring these individuals, and through functional MRIs, where you could see like which parts of your brain were fired up and, the hormone release in your brain. 3 months later, even 3 months after that act of writing a letter, they saw this group still had the same functional MRI, where the benefits of doing that one act of writing a letter, 3 months later, you could still see the benefits of it in that individual's brain. So it fired up this thing, and it had long-lasting effects, which is why there's, like therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists are like really using gratitude as a way of, dealing with anxiety, dealing with stress, and helping with that positivity, and constantly training your brain to think positive thoughts, to be grateful, to be thankful.
I literally have goosebumps when you said that, right? That it has like that everlasting
long-term
and
effect.
it's funny because as we were growing up, and even now, like, and I would always make fun of my mom, like, so for anything, she's like, shook her, shook her is thank you. For anything, how are you doing, mom? Shook her. Like, if something's even going bad, like, shook her. And I'm like, mom, like, seriously, this is happening, and this is, but like, there's science that's why she was so calm.
Yes. And, you think about, like, you have the saying, there's always, a silver lining to every gray cloud and things like that. There's a lot of like, philosophy behind it, but then there's actually science supporting that when you always look at, and then I would think like if you did research on pessimists versus optimists, the health benefits, I'm sure, are going to be, you can see a drastic difference because, you're talking about, you're talking about all these stress hormones, right? That when you're constantly in a state of panic or anxiety, and that's your normal state of functioning, where you're always worrying about something, or you're always, then you'll have digestive health issues. You're going to end up with ulcers. You have like so many things, because think about it, you're wearing your body down by those negative emotions constantly. If you have anger, or if you have anxiety, or if you're depressed, you're sad, all of these emotions not only wear you down mentally, but physically, they wear you down too. And you end up with health issues. So on the flip side, when you have empathy and gratitude and you practice these positive emotions, then things like blood pressure, right? Things like, again, anxiety, and just things where you stress out and you get worried. And if you're constantly working on, trying to have more oxytocin or more dopamine or more serotonin being released in your body, you're going to, because they are called the feel-good hormones. They're called the pleasure hormones because they make you feel good. And that sense of well-being is also like, then when you're feeling good about yourself and you're feeling, better, that's how your family and everyone around you, and then it's contagious, right?
It is. Yeah, that's what they say. The smile is contagious, right? And see the science.
In fact, like when you say, how do we practice gratitude? Some of the simple things is, smile more often. Appreciate nature. Even if you're thinking about like, what do I appreciate today, or what am I grateful for? Grateful for this beautiful weather, right? You walk outside and it's cold, but the sun's out. It's so bright. To take a walk in the park, like that always re-energizes me, right? To think about that, appreciating nature. You can watch inspiring videos. I do this very simple thing every Monday morning. I send out an email to all my doctors, to my entire department, right? And it's called Mindful Monday. And I'm just setting the tone for the entire week, right? It'll be a picture or a quote or something. Very simple, takes me less than 30 seconds to find something that resonates with me, and I just send it out. And people used to make fun of me because they're like, oh, she's not our administrator, she's our spiritual guru and this and that. But I kid you not, like over time, people actually look for that email. If I don't submit, they're like, are you out of office? Where is it? And I was like, and these are my surgeons asking me, and I'm like, wait a minute, I didn't even know that you were paying attention to that, right? But simple things like that. Notice, savor, and absorb good things. Watch videos. Observe other people's gratitude. Like, you know, even if you were having a conversation and being thankful about something, that also helps me think about, like, you know, what am I thankful for? And there's the benefits of that too. So again, lots of different ways of, you know, making the most of these positive emotions. And it not only helps us be better individuals, be better leaders, be better parents, be better members of society, but it actually helps us in managing our stress and our anxiety. And, you know, it's like, mental health is a very general term, but you know, it's that emotional resilience and that well-being that everyone needs. You know, you may not have a mental health concern or issue, but you certainly want to be more emotionally resilient.
Absolutely.
Right? And be able to do better.
Handle life better, right?
And then you're teaching this to your kids. So if you don't practice it yourself, what kind of example are you setting?
And we were talking about the kids, right? So you want to share what you do with your kids for gratitude, because I thought that's beautiful. I'm going to start that.
So it's again an effort, right? Trying to make an 8 and a 10-year-old sit still for 10 minutes. But I'm proud of them because I started this. We've only been doing it for 2 weeks. At night, we do a guided mindfulness or a guided meditation kind of an exercise where we turn off the lights, and I'm just finding things on YouTube where, you know, it guides us through. We're focusing on our breathing. And then, you know, we think about one thing that we're grateful for. And you can do this over dinner time also. You know, you're sitting and having dinner with your family and each one just expresses something that they're grateful for. And it doesn't have to be generic, like I'm grateful for my family. It could be a simple example like my sister cooked for me today because I was running late and, you know, was not going to be able to make dinner for my family. And I'm grateful for that. Or my husband noticed that my back was hurting and came and gave me a back rub. Like it could be very small and specific. It doesn't have to be I'm grateful for my family. Every day you're like, I'm grateful for my family, right? But it's actual acts of kindness or simple examples that you can do. Or the mindfulness where you're teaching your kids, and it's important for me too. I'm doing it for myself, but I'm also wanting my kids to do it with me, where we're calming our minds down before we go to bed, right? Where you're shutting off all devices and you're trying to shut your brain down and just focus on your breathing and think about something that you're grateful for in the day, and then you fall asleep with that last thing, right? And so you're not thinking about anything else, but you go to bed thinking about that one thing that you're grateful for. You sleep better. Your sleep-wake cycle is better. And the next morning, you kind of you feel refreshed. And I've noticed that. You know, I've seen my kids sleep better. I've seen my son sleep better.
And I was talking to you about boys. It's so hard, but you know the effect you can see immediately, right? So that is,
and it's simple. It's just 10 minutes. You know, and I started with 5 minutes. Now we're at 10 minutes, and I'm not going to increase it. Like even those 10 minutes, if we get it to where they're able to focus for those 10 minutes, that's a big, you know, difference. Because I know they're still fidgety, they're still probably thinking about something else, but again,
practicing, you're developing it, right? From now. So
it's the baby steps to try and keep doing that, where you're committing to it for yourself, and then you're setting that example and you're helping your children to kind of be more in tune of their emotions, be able to calm their brains down. And I've told them, like today he had spelling bee this morning, and I was like, anytime you get anxious, just take 3 deep breaths, right? And it actually calms your heartbeat down, right? And the reason that they ask you to practice deep breathing is because it slows your heart rate down, and that way you don't have that adrenaline. Always on that rush where you don't have that fight, flight, or freeze response. You're calmer. And that's why even if you just do 3 breaths, right?
Yeah.
I tried like chanting Om with them, then it turns into this giggling spree. So there's like different things that we've tried, but so far this 10 minutes of mindfulness and gratitude is working. So fingers crossed, we'll continue to do that.
Yes. Thank you so much, Mitali. The hour's gone so fast. Of course, we have to continue this conversation later, but thank you for being here, and thank you to all our listeners. We will be here same time, same place next Monday.
Thank you.
Thank you.